How many patients nationwide need access to CBD? Estimate.
I don't have that information.
Is it tens of thousands? Is it hundreds of thousands? Is it hundreds? I just need to know, because 400 patients, I know is not even meeting the need for New York State. So how many patients need access to medicine?
Well, the challenge is that we have many medicines approved for the treatment of seizure disorders. We recognize they have side effects. We recognize that not all of them work in all patients. So to identify the subgroup of individuals that have tried all of those and they're not working for them, I wouldn't have an estimate. It's many patients. Rather than trying to decide what that number is, I really, my job is to get a product.
I don't want to limit the access to CBD to one drug company. It is absurd that we're saying that's going to solve the problem. So what I hear from you is that having this one drug company who's got 400 patients, we're solving the problem. That's outrageous. That's an outrageous impression to leave on this committee, because you have thousands of patients in my state alone who need access to this medicine, and they don't all get accepted by the drug trials. And when you talk to a parent and they tell you, yeah, the other medicines that are approved for my kid are barbiturates that knock him out and put him in a coma-like state, that's not a quality of life I'd want for any child. So let's be clear. We need to change the laws to remove impediments so we have research being conducted across the country, as is being done in other countries like Canada and Israel. We cannot have only one place where this plant can be grown. It needs to be distributed more widely so people can get access to the materials they need to do the research. We have to change the schedule. You said Schedule 1 to Schedule 2 releases impediments. What are those impediments? Explain to us what is the difference between Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 in terms of a researcher's ability to research this drug and a drug company's ability to produce a medicine that has the protections that Senator Feinstein needs for her constituents.
Be happy to talk about the one particular role that Schedule 1 has in terms of the FDA, and then I'd ask Mr. Anastasi to talk about the DEA's role. So when a Schedule 1 product is being studied, they have to report to us any changes in their protocol. So if they've done a clinical trial and they are enrolling a number of patients and they're following it for 6 weeks, and they decide that they need to change the conditions of that study so that instead of, I don't know, whatever, 3 weeks, it's going to be followed for 4 weeks, something like that. Typically those changes come into us, but unless the trial is allowed to continue to go forward. For controlled substances, for Schedule 1 substances, there's a review that's required. The DEA sends that protocol change to us. We are on a 30-day clock to look at that and get an answer back to the DEA, and then the DEA goes back to that investigator and says, yes, the trial can go forward.
It's fair to say the process is very cumbersome.
Well, so it is not a straight, there is that additional step, this additional exchange that has to happen that doesn't occur for products that are in different schedules and less controlled schedules.
Between 1 and 2 is that 1 says there are no medical uses, and 2 says there may be medical uses, but they need to be researched. Is that correct?
The definition for Schedule 2 is actually Schedule 2 products have a high risk of abuse, think opioids and things, but have an accepted medical use.
And what are some acceptable medical use for opiates? What are the examples?
Well, accepted medical use for opiates, they're indicated for the treatment of pain.
Oxycodone, Oxycontin, all these are derivatives of opiates, correct?
That's right. They're approved by the FDA for indications like treatment of pain and cancer and things like that.
So, Mr. Ranazizi, please give us the FDA's perspective.
Excuse
me, the DEA's perspective.
The Schedule 1 researcher has to apply for a separate research registration. He submits protocols. The protocols basically outline who he is, what his background is, then what his research is going to be, and under what authority he's doing that research. For instance, is he doing it with an institution? Is he doing it pursuant to an IND? We get that protocol, we submit it to FDA for approval, and once it's approved, it comes back to us. We ensure that he's got a secure container to keep his drugs in, and we explain the paperwork to him for procurement, and he gets his
And where does he
registration.
get procurement? Where can he procure?
CBD, he'd go through the NIDA program and get it from Research Triangle, I believe, is the distributor, but it can come from Ole Miss as well.
So given that NIDA's mission is to lead the nation in bringing the power of science to bear on drug abuse and addiction, what specific steps is NIDA taking to advance research into the medical benefits of marijuana? To put it another way, how can NIDA control the research supply of medical marijuana studies that seek to find benefits when the mission is solely focused on the negative consequences of marijuana use and there is a better agency suited to handling the research supply of marijuana?
I'm going to answer that question. Because indeed, one of the things that NIDA does is study the effects of drugs in the human brain. But the research is not just focused per se on the negative effects of marijuana. And in fact, as I very explicitly stated, we're very interested on doing research that relates to the potential benefits that cannabidiol may have on the treatment of drug addiction. We're also interested in understanding how cannabidiol or other cannabinoids may be utilized for the better management of pain, as well as for the potential management of patients suffering from HIV. As for your question in terms of we having the only source of research for marijuana, that's not something that NIDA chose to do.
Right.
There is a law that requires that we be that agency, and we comply with the law.
Okay. So for FDA, what is the FDA's approval process for marijuana now? Given that marijuana is a multi-compound botanical substance, is it reasonable to expect that marijuana could ever make it through the FDA approval process? If not, would it make sense to develop a new approval protocol for multi-compound botanical substance such as marijuana within the FDA?
It's absolutely reasonable to expect that marijuana would be able to be developed as a drug. We've done it before. We've approved other plant-derived drugs. We have guidance that we have put out. I have in place a team whose job it is to help developers with plants that want to develop drugs from them, to give them any advice and help that they can. So yes, there is a pathway laid out. Yes, it's been done.
What's the timing for that pathway currently?
Well, what we need is an academic and interested investigator working with us and doing the studies that we need to have to be certain we have a product that's well characterized, that's studied appropriately in a patient population that we can identify. So I can give a prescription, I can tell a prescriber that they can prescribe that medicine to those patients.
So the current 400-person study, is that sufficient for you to begin the process?
This process begins with conversations about the drug itself. So in the case of a plant-derived product like a marijuana product, it would start with a discussion of how they want to develop it, what patients they want to study it in, what kinds of treatments they want to measure, what outcomes they
Is
think.
that happening with this company that you talked about?
That's already happened with this company. It happened, and any additional conversations they need, we're having. Any investigator that's interested in coming in and talking to us about developing a drug for marijuana, we have a process to put them into involving a discussion with the Right Review Division specifically to lay out what kinds of trial designs they'd need to use.
Thank you.
Thank you,